So I knew at some point there would be a rebellion, but I didn't expect it to become this fast and not in this amount. We currently are looking potentially at least, from what reports are at least saying, roughly around 50 Tory MPs are trying to get concessions from Sunak over the coming levelling up bill. Now, remember, the levelling up sort of program and the bill itself, a key pillar of Boris Johnson's entire administration. And what do they really have to show for levelling up? To be honest, not a lot. They've got absolutely next to nothing really to show, bar essentially moving some money about into sort of, this was a fund to sort of build new fields and sort of improve pitches. Then it got moved into a new one, which basically said leveling up funds to improve, essentially that has really been the story of leveling up so far, and areas that are crying out for this leveling up money, well, they haven't got a single penny, as we've already discussed with the issue that went on in Barnsley. But if you've got such a big faction now putting so much pressure on Sunak to make concessions, then what does this say for the rest of Sunak's premiership? Essentially, Sunak can do effectively nothing. Any single piece of controversial legislation that he might lay forward, that any group of the many factions in the Tory party that they do not like, then they will now just rebel and put serious pressure on Sunak, and effectively meaning that no matter which direction Sunak would like to move, he has absolutely no room to maneuver whatsoever. So let's go into this, because I think they are probably going to succeed in taking this. Otherwise, Sunak has to then rely on Labour voters, on Labour votes. And then there's a huge point where Labour could start going, well, actually, Rishi, we want this put in the levelling up bill. And then Labour can go, see, we got this in the levelling up bill. Wasn't it such a good idea? And again, that might scare off more Conservatives, creating an even larger rebellion. So you can see that just he's got nowhere to go from here unless he goes for a general election. That is really his only way out of this at the moment. So, like I say, before we get diving into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and an annotation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button down below as well. And there is the YouTube subscription called the Pony Club, where you can join that and you get sort of lots of sort of bit and extras and stuff like that that you get when you help support the channel that way as well. So, on with today's story. This comes from The Guardian about this, with the title of Rebel Tories Expect Concessions from Sunak to Pass the Levelling Up Bill. Rishi Sunak could be forced to compromise with Rebel MPs over the scrapping of the housing targets to avoid relying on Labour votes to pass the Levelling Up Bill. It comes as the former Cabinet Minister, Simon Clarke, attempted to amend the same bill to allow new onshore wind farms, on which he hopes to try and attract Conservative and Labour support. Onshore wind has been, or at least was, to be relaxed under Liz Truss, but Sunak's government has kept the ban. The Prime Minister was forced to pull the second day of the Levelling Up Bill after a sizable Tory rebellion on MPs over planning. That amendment has led to the former Cabinet Minister, Theresa Vills, and is backing from over 46 MPs who want to scrap the mandatory local housing targets and make them advisory only. So bear in mind, we are in a housing crisis. We need to build more houses. Getting local councils to sort of have housing targets and get them to stick to them, not only just in areas where, there's a lot of housing, but areas where there isn't a lot of housing, mainly in sort of Conservative constituencies, which is why most of these Conservatives are rebelling against this. But yeah, it's very interesting to see. But this is always comes back to these planning restrictions, and this planning rebellion goes all the way back to David Cameron. So this isn't new, and it's something that even Cameron had problems with. But back to it. So the government pulled the vote on the bill scheduled for Monday to allow them at least more time to engage with MPs. Labour said that it would not back the move, but multiple MPs said that Sunak had been left paralysed by the scale of the rebellion. He cannot push this through because he would lose and have to rely on Labour votes, one said. That means this shows that in the first few weeks, he effectively doesn't have a majority in the party. That's very dangerous for a prime minister who came to power by the way he did. And that does not send good signals for how long Sunak may last. If he's already having such a sizable rebellion over something like this, then yeah, it does not send good signs, because it essentially sends the sign that Sunak will have to govern with essentially going on the opinion, even though the Conservatives have like an 80-seat majority, Sunak has to govern like he has a majority of 0. That does not spell good news for him. Another MP has said that the rebels had Sunak by the balls and would not be bought off. And they said they were expecting significant concessions from the government. A Department for Levelling Up and Housing Communications source said that there were efforts underway to try and find a compromise. Engagement is obviously the most important thing. Delaying the vote gives us more time to engage. The former cabinet minister, Maria Miller, who has also signed the amendment, said that it was good that ministers were at least thinking again, and said that the amendment would allow communities such as her Basingstoke constituency to, quote, to slow down house building so that we need in our community rather than building houses for the needs of the region. What? Why would you not want more houses? But that's a good. Oh god. Yeah. So back to it. But apparently, the willingness to compromise has also angered others on parts of the party. Clark, who was the Levelling Up secretary under Liz Truss, has said that the party's vote would collapse if it did not help people on the housing ladder. And this comes back from something else that we said yesterday, that one of the Conservatives in the wrote a piece for Conservative Home, and he came to the shocking realization that if we give young people a reason to vote Conservative, then they might shockingly vote Conservative. And honestly, the head explosion in that article was fascinating to read, but there you go. Anyway, he went back to it saying, if you want to see the future of Conservatives, it is when we don't build homes. Look at London, he said. Our collapsing vote in the capital is at least partly because you can't make the case for popular conservatism if you can't afford to buy or even rent. The flip side, why we can win in areas like Teesside, it's the latest in part because you have a nursery or a teacher and you can still afford a proper family home. This isn't rocket science, it's economics and politics 101. Again, there are still at least some sane, rational thinkers in the Conservative Party. But when asked about, of course, the planning and the rebels, during an appearance before the Commons Treasury Committee, Jeremy Hunt said that while any decision would be up to Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, he was very aware of the difficulties over planning faced by young people. He said, I think that we need to ask ourselves why it is the way our planning rules work. It often sets local communities against the national need to build more houses, and how we can improve that, the Chancellor said. Clark's amendment, tabled for Wednesday, would revise the national planning policy framework and permit the developer of new onshore wind farms, which Labour sources have said they were examining the wording, but suggested they were at least optimistic that the party could support the move. Allowing onshore wind development to proceed where local communities want it would be the right thing to do economically, environmentally, and in our terms of energy security, one source said. Onshore wind is the cheapest source of form of energy generation, and it is popular with the public, including a clear majority of 2019 Conservative voters. We should put the decision back into the hands of local people rather than applying what effectively was a blanket ban made in Whitehall. Labour has said that it would double the amount of onshore wind, once the cheapest and the quickest sources of renewable energy, and quadruple the offshore wind by 2030. So as you can see, this is a significant rebellion. And oh boy, do the rebels know it. Oh boy. When you've got one source saying they've got Rishi by the balls, yeah. But what does this say, though, for future bills or future ideas? Not only that, could we see a very similar rebellion maybe over something in the budget? Maybe. Maybe. um, we'll have to see. But this sends a very worrying signal of how long, well, Rishi Sunak's tenure in Parliament may last, and I don't think it's going to be a long one. Would we see an election by this year? I doubt it. I think the Conservatives are at least keen to appear somewhat stable, but that's not going to last forever, especially with Rishi Sunak in a situation like this. It will, I think, we'll be getting a general election next year. I still think that is what is going to happen. But if an general election does happen this year, then oh wow, what went wrong? What went wrong so quickly, so fast to take down Rishi Sunak? But then again, I have said his entire government is a house of cards built on quicksand, built on an earthquake fault line. One little quake, one little tumble could set the whole thing off, and it's just a matter of what could do it and what might do it. And maybe this could be it. Maybe this ferments into something larger. I don't know. But remember, you've got rebels on the fact that they're making concessions. So there are people angry that there are concessions being made to rebels, and then you've got the rebels themselves trying to make concessions. This can only lead to more further disasters down the road, and it gives Rishi Sunak absolutely no maneuver room whatsoever. You know, is he a lame duck prime minister? By the looks that things are going, absolutely. And remember, the Conservatives have a massive majority of 80 plus at the moment. And yet, Rishi Sunak is in this position. It does not look good. It does not bode well for his future. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page. And of course, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, the Pony Club as well down below. And as always, thank you very much, guys, for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.